Thank you very much, Joe, and thanks to Jill, to Johnny and us as well for the opportunity to come along today. The whole thing about payment processing, and my interest in payment processing is actually now my life, of course, because once you leave your job and get into something like this, it's not really work. I don't work anymore at all. I just love what I do, and and payments is what it's all about, and the internet payments, and particularly my focus and my passion is all around internet payments and paying for stuff online. So I don't get into the wholesale side of payments and wholesale processing of payments and that type of things. I worked in a wholesale bank for a long time, and I guess sometimes I call that I did 14 years inside, and then I got out, and now I work in this space. I mean, I am quite open about where I think the payment industry are. I know there's some people from banks here in Ipso, Russell's here from Ipso, and I don't do good and negative feedback, I do good and constructive feedback. So it's not in any way being negative, but there are many, many opportunities which have been spoken about for many years, about things that we could do here to enable payments and to enable people to pay more easily, to pay more, without the need for cash, without the need for checks and so on. But those initiatives have been spoken about for many, many years, and it's how do we make those ideas real, I suppose, is the challenge that we've got, because they're not becoming real, and other people will come in and make those things real if we don't make them real. I'm going to go through it fairly fast as well, because remember that slide from 2 weeks ago? We had a guest here, and somebody showed me this slide about 2 weeks ago, and I was looking at it, all the top websites in the world broken down by category, and of course there's no Irish website there. And we spoke last week at the Internet Congress about the concept and the aspiration that we should have as businesses to be on that page, and that someday we should see Irish internet businesses represented on that page, and that there's no reason why that couldn't become real, because it could be very, very real. And we spoke about a number of different Irish internet businesses who today do extremely well, and yet you mightn't know about them. There's companies there who these are all customers of ours for whom we process their online payments. So we process their payments into a whole range of different banks on their behalf when people shop on their websites. But some of these, the likes of Cartrawler, that they've had something like an 80% growth over the last 6 months in the volumes that they're processing. They process for Polish people who want to book a car and off Lot Airlines website. That booking actually comes to their server in Dublin, and they process it into us to get the payment. So in other words, they're participating in commerce in Poland when somebody wants to book a car on a Polish airline's website. And it's a very good example of the type of opportunity that does exist. Chain reaction cycles are up in County. I always get mixed up with this Antrim. I think it's Antrim. They employ 270 staff. He's got a massive warehouse, and he sells bicycle parts. Now he also wears several parts of bicycles in his face, in his eyebrows, his nose, and his ears. But he's Chris Watson, his name. He's now shipping 250,000 items a month from that warehouse, and he's the largest online retailer of bicycle parts in the world, and he's now in the top 100 UK online retailers. And he's based up there, as I say, in County Antrim. It's a superb example of somebody who's moved into the B2C space in terms of online retailing. You got EasyTop. When I met Mark Rutland and he told me what he was going to do, I said, "You're nuts, it's never going to work." He's providing a top-up service to people in exotic countries, to the expats that live in the big cities. So in other words, if you're a Jamaican living in London, you can top up your Jamaican cousins and family's phones back in Jamaica. And his volumes have doubled over the last 6 months. It's phenomenal business. He's now working in something like 120, 150 different countries, providing top-up services to the mobile operators in those countries. Nothing whatsoever to do with the Irish economy, no dependency upon what needs to happen over there. So there's loads of examples. These guys in Avenue do hotel bookings, 40% of which are now based in the UK. UK people booking hotels in the UK, and they make money, and their servers are down in Limerick. So again, it's just another example of an Irish company participating in overseas economies. And there's hundreds of these, and the idea is that, what we've got to do is find more and more and more of these and get companies to grow. And what they are is, the important thing to remember is the distinction. Sometimes when people talk about e-commerce, they talk about what Irish people buy online, but that's irrelevant. That is not our opportunity. What Irish people, there's only 4 million of us, of which only so many are actually online. So what we buy online is neither here nor there. And sometimes that statistic is quoted as being, the growth in Irish e-commerce. It's to do with what we sell online, first of all, and selling online is extremely important, and much more important to think about that, and also who we connect online. Because by connecting people online, you're participating in the, the transaction, the commerce transaction that's happening between the buyer and the seller. Hostel World sell hostels, I think, in something like 170 countries to people all over the world. So Hostel World can sell bookings in Spanish hostels to French people who want to stay there. It's got nothing to do with us selling some Irish stock or Irish infantry. This is selling, the world's infantry to the world itself, and therefore it represents a global opportunity for us to participate in that. And the good news for us, of course, is that the more the people that do that, the more payment processing they need underneath it all, and therefore we can help them with the processing of those payments. For ourselves, the only piece of propaganda I will do is Virgin Atlantic went live with our service 2 weeks ago. So Virgin Atlantic have offices in these locations, from Boston to Miami to Barbados, Cuba, wherever, Nairobi. And in each of those locations now, there are staff of Virgin Atlantic using a web-based, what we call a virtual terminal, to capture the details of the bookings of their customers. They'll put in the car hire details, the flight details, they put in, the credit card details, and all that information is captured back to us, to our service here in Dublin, and we bounce it back for authorization to banks in America, India, and in the UK. Nothing whatsoever to do with Ireland. And all that business for the global Virgin Atlantic business is now being processed through us. So again, it's an example of how we can participate in the global, growth of e-commerce that's happening out there at the moment. But there are many other companies like us as well. And Joe, I think I got this list from one of your colleagues. This is not the full list of all the companies in Ireland that are involved in payments, but it's a list of the ones certainly that EI are supporting, which is extremely important as well. And the role that EI play with the payment sector is extremely important. And many of these people are involved in, some of them are involved, for example, in very specialised areas like dynamic currency conversion, where they're assisting retailers to convert the currency of the card at the point of sale rather than giving the issuing bank the opportunity to make the money on the foreign exchange. They might be involved in security. They might have a focus on direct debiting rather than credit card processing, whatever it might be. So each has its own kind of, its own, maybe it's mobile, for example, or maybe Integral are heavily involved in the customer present side of payment processing rather than what we would do is the customer not present, because we process payments where the customer is not physically there with the merchant but over the internet. So again, everybody's got their own little kind of angle. The guys in card commerce have done a very successful deal with Barclays, so that they put their software on all the Barclays terminals, so that if you're a shop in the UK and if you want to give your customer a gift card, it's actually, Card Commerce's software that now sits on that terminal that processes those gift card transactions for Barclays Bank as well. So again, it's a superb example of, how we're getting in under the radar and mopping up all these transactions. So having transactions coming through Ireland and Dublin is a good thing because we can obviously put that there. But inherent in the customer not present world is the issue of fraud. And I'm going to share with you some of the statistics that I have. I got these from Visa and MasterCard, and there was all sorts of terms and conditions, and some of the PowerPoints will only open read-only and they can't be cut and pasted and so on. But they said that we're happy to look at them. The issue when selling online, there's a couple of issues I'm going to touch off. One is fraud, the other is security, and the other is the debit cards, and the importance of the debit card in the context of buying online. And finally, I'll touch on what we call bank transfers and what I think is the emerging trend in terms of the way that payments online will change into the future. When it comes to fraud, unfortunately, because it's a customer not present situation, the customer's not physically there. So I log on to aerlingus.com and I go book a flight and I use Rob Cobert's credit card. And Aer Lingus will not know that at the point of sale. And Rob will get the statement a couple of weeks later, and he probably doesn't even check his, but maybe eventually.
The banks confirm it's backstage.
Yeah, because we all think that banks don't make mistakes, and then what will happen is that Rob will say, "I didn't do that transaction with Aer Lingus," and eventually it'll go back to Aer Lingus, it'll go back onto their bank, we'll get back onto the issuing bank. We tried it, and Aer Lingus will say, "But it was somebody called Colm Lyon. I don't know where he is because he gave an address that they can't follow up on." And Aer Lingus gets stung for that cost. The cost of that fraud is with the retailer when they're accepting credit cards in a customer not present situation, and the cost of that can be extremely high. If you take Vodafone, we're topping up non-registered prepaid phones. So you go into Vodafone and you get yourself a prepaid phone, but you don't register it. So I can take Rob Corbett's credit card again, and I can sell you €25 top-ups for a tenner. And people do that. They'll sell you top-ups for mobile phones for like a €20 top-up for a £5 or a €30 top-up for 20 quid, whatever way it works, depending on the demand at the time. And for Vodafone, that's just used. There's nothing that they can do. They can't chase that person because they've no location. The customer wasn't physically there. They've no way of physically tracking them down. So credit cards were never, ever, ever designed to work in a customer not present situation. They certainly were never designed to work online, and because of that they have a fundamental issue with regard to fraud. And indeed what happened then was, because the attractiveness of fraudsters getting handle on them, the issue of security has become a big issue, because people then that do take credit cards now have a massive burden to pay in terms of trying to keep the information secure. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But you might or might not be familiar with the process of 3D Secure. When people were taking credit card details online, a couple of years ago, both Visa and MasterCard came up with this concept of what they called 3D Secure. It stands for the three domains. And the way it works is that I would log on to aerlingus.com and put in my credit card details. But let's say I have a credit card issued to me by Ulster Bank, right? What happens is that I go on to aerlingus.com, and as I put in my credit card details, I'm momentarily redirected to my credit card issuer to validate myself. Okay, and I put in my credentials with my issuer of the credit card, and then I can go ahead with the purchase. Okay, and this is what we call 3D Secure. It's a security feature that Visa and MasterCard brought to the market a couple of years ago. Well, a couple of years ago, 5, 6 years ago, 7 maybe at this stage. Yeah. I think it's in 2002 we started working on it. So it's been there a long time, and it was their attempt to authenticate the cardholder at the point of sale, right? So you're with me. So when I go online, I go to aerlingus.com, I've got an Ulster Bank issued card, so therefore I get redirected to Ulster Bank, I validate who I am, and then Aer Lingus go ahead and process the authorization, and the transaction is normal, right? Now we call this 3D Secure, and if you take the Visa numbers for Europe, I just want to give you an idea that of the e-commerce transactions that Visa process in Europe, 25% of those are what we call, they're verified by Visa, they've used the process to authenticate. In other words, they're more secure than the other 75%, shall we say. And for the merchant, the guy who's selling, okay, he's getting a guaranteed payment on those transactions and doesn't have to be as concerned about the issues of fraud, which I spoke about earlier. So this is a system or process that you can implement to help to address the issue of fraud. And I just wanted to share that that's the Visa number, right? That's as it was in 2007, which is say 25%. And as of yesterday, when I got the most recent instance, that's as of March 2009, you can see they're up at 35%. So it's indicating that the rollout and of the processes to authenticate the credit card holders in Europe is continuing. The lower figure, the blue figure, shows that of the 35% where the merchant tried to authenticate the card holder, 23% of those were fully authenticated, and that the person did confirm that they were who they are, which is quite a high figure given where they've come from. But you can see the time it's taken, 7 years, to get to that. So this technology was around. I thought we talked the other day about the rollout of technologies and that they go much faster these days. Here's a great example of something. It was taken 7 years to get to this level, which is a long, long time if you think about it. And that's because there are many issues with regard to this process. Many, many issues that merchants don't like, that consumers don't like. It's been, some people think it's a phishing attack. They don't know what it is and whether they should use it or not. So it's not a great solution, which is one of the reasons why. I have to just link into this MasterCard, as I say, because we're not allowed copy and paste through it, so that won't work. These are the MasterCard ones. So MasterCard have a similar service to secure customers, to make it safer for them to shop online, right? And the fascinating thing about this is that the yellow here is the UK and the blue is Europe, and this is the worldwide, where MasterCard are now saying they've got 340,000 merchants selling online who are now using this as part of their online selling process, right? And of those, you can see the majority are based in the UK and Europe, not in the US, where this particular service hasn't been taken up at all over the last 10 years, or 7, whatever it is. And these are very up-to-date stats as well. Again, they're looking at about a 40% take-up, which is the same as the Visa 35. And this is just the European one. So from a European perspective, you can see that the UK is storming ahead here. So in other words, the number of merchants, and hence the number of transactions which are being authenticated online at the point of sale, is much higher in the UK than it is anywhere else. And one of the reasons for that was because in the UK, when the switch card changed to a Maestro card, you might remember a couple of years ago, and the switch was the debit card, like our laser card here, and they took the switch card, and MasterCard purchased that brand and made it a Maestro debit card. So a UK domestic debit card became a Maestro card, and they mandated to merchants selling online that if you want to accept a debit card, you must use 3D Secure. And of course, once you bring out the mandate, you get the transactions. Linked into that is in Ireland. Q1 last year, so we take our volume, so we process 6 billion per annum through the system for about 3,000 customers. So we've got a reasonable representation of the market here in terms of what people are selling online. Right? And when we look at our statistics, in January, February, March of 2008, we were less than 7% of the transactions that we were processing were using that solution. Okay, so in Ireland, merchants and banks would be behind, therefore, in the implementation of this compared to Europe, and in particular compared to the UK. Okay, as of this year, it's gone up slightly, and it's about 11-10% at the moment, with the number of fully authenticated transactions running up at 4%. Okay, so what it's showing is that the rollout is happening, but it's extremely slow, and there is no large merchant in Ireland that has yet turned this service fully on. And of the banks, AIB and Ulster Bank have implemented it for their issued cards, and Bank of Ireland have not at this time. And therefore you don't see this level of, deeper level of security happening online within the Irish market. So the usage is growing, but it remains behind. Let's just talk about the laser card here in Ireland, because this is a very important card. So the number of laser cards in issue, what is it now? It's a lot. It was an extra million or something that came out over the last 2 years.
It did.
Yeah.
The next one that happened in about 3.5-4 million off the top of my head.
It's phenomenal, like the number of laser cards, and people are the usage of people like their prepaid phones. They like their debit cards, in comparison to credit cards. It's just the consumer habits are moving that way. And when you look at April 2007 up until March 2008, you can see that the laser cards here, as a percentage of the overall transaction volumes that merchants were selling. This is selling online again. So again, this is not high street sales. This is online sales on the internet. Yeah, you can see that the laser grew from less than 20% to about 25%. But then if I look at it now for the last 6 months or 7 months, I can see that the laser cards are now up to about 34%. So the laser card has now grown, continuing to grow, and it's now accounting for 34% of the transactions that businesses take online are done using a laser card. Okay, and why is that important? It's important because when you look at the laser card, the average transaction value is over €200 when it's used online. When it's used in the high street, it's considerably less. It's probably 20, 30 euro. It's a lot less than that. But online, people are using their laser card to book flights, to pay their motor tax, to pay their insurance, to pay their gas bills, their ESB bills, their telephone bills, whatever it might be. So it's been used a lot more online than it had been before. And the amount that we processed is shocking, that in March we went over the 100 million. So we processed over €100 million worth of laser card transactions in the month of March alone. So again, it's showing a big increase when you look at what's above the previous months. Just the sheer volume of what people are doing online. And the laser card is becoming the payment method that people prefer to use when paying online as well. And what's the problems with that? It's the fastest growing payment method, but it's got the least security. And there's no consumer protection, because if you pay with your debit card and the merchant goes out of business, you've got a problem. You've got to engage in a lengthy discussion with your bank. And also the clarity of development and the strategy with respect to that card into the future keeps changing within the context of SEPA. People are asking questions about, will the laser card remain when we have a fully SEPA harmonised environment, or will it not remain? And again, the dialogue that goes on within the industry will be pretty poor around trying to discuss where that card is going to end up and what's going to happen to it. And yet it's one of the most important payment methods that we've got with respect to what consumers use it for. There are a small number of laser cards that now have the CVV on the back of it, but don't be fooled, it's not checked by any bank, okay? Even though they do. So it's there. There's no way of flagging the transaction as being an e-commerce transaction versus a high street transaction. The chargeback process when there is a dispute is done with paper, and there's no electronic system to support it. Some merchants will refuse point blank to accept laser completely online. They say, I'm not going to take it because I'm using 3D Secure for my Visa and MasterCard transactions. I know therefore I've got some protection as a merchant from selling online, but I'm not going to take laser, because why would I? Because I'm going to be exposed and I'm going to be liable for all those chargebacks. There are regular attacks on the card from people who are creating the laser card numbers, and they're trying to flood into a merchant, and they send in transactions one every second or so, and they just increment the numbers trying to get transactions through the system. So it's prone to attacks as well. Now, that said, there are other merchants who will only accept laser, right? Because the cost of taking a credit card is too high. Aldi, yeah. And online, there are some utilities that will only accept a laser card when you're paying online, because they're not prepared to pay, because a laser card is processed with a flat rate fee to the merchant, while a credit card is processed with an ad valorem fee, and the merchants are not prepared to pay the ad valorem fees. What some merchants have done, which again is something that the banks could easily do, they do an offline verification process. For example, if you want to top up your phone with Vodafone and you want to use your laser card, you must register your laser card with them. We actually do a debit to your card for a random amount between 5 cents and €5, and you've got 24 hours to tell us what that random amount was, and if you get that right, we then enable your card for subsequent processing. So it's a way of kind of doing an offline authentication that you are who you said you are, because you've obviously had to go online to your bank account, verify the number, put it back into the Vodafone website. Okay, that definitely is Rob Cobert because you've given us that information. So we're happy to do it. So that happens there as well. So it's one of those ones that needs a lot of discussion, because we could end up with a lot of merchants and a lot of people, depending on what happens to the laser card. And if the interchange rates change, which is the rate that one bank's going to charge another bank for processing these, it's conceivable that many merchants could end up paying a higher price for processing laser card transactions into the future than that which to do now, because we've gone with a separate solution to harmonise it. Very briefly, that's the dominance of Visa, just of interest to you, that when you look at the volumes again that we process, and out of 100 Visas, the yellow one, so Visa's consistently over 50% of all online transactions that we process are processed with Visa cards. This is MasterCard and this is laser at the top. You can see American Express, and you can see the rise of the domestic Maestro in the UK up at the very top as well. So again, it's interesting that the dominance of the Visa brand over the MasterCard brand, certainly in Ireland anyway. So very briefly then, just about bank transfers. When I use my credit card or use my debit card online, or indeed in any situation, that merchant who's selling me something, what they're doing is they're taking that piece of information and they're sending a file into the bank, and they're basically pulling money from my account, okay? Because I've given them the details of that account in effect. It's been the actual transfer of funds is initiated by the merchant, okay, by the seller in that situation, and it's what I would call a pull payment method, because I'm pulling money from somebody else's bank account. And obviously, if I do that wrong, I've got to give it back, right? There are other ways to pay money, and of course, one of them is to push the money. So why can't I, as a consumer, push the money to the retailer at the point of sale? And that's a very obvious solution. And when I push the money to the retailer at the point of sale, no longer is that retailer taking risk with that transaction, because in actual fact, he hasn't initiated the transaction. I have as a consumer, and I've pushed the money. And this is what's emerging all over the continent as well. And it's nothing new in this. It's been around for donkey's years, as Russell will testify to. We've spoken about this for a long time. And the idea is to allow people to be able to transfer in real time from their bank accounts, right? Because everybody banks online, right? We've got our banking online. It's been very, very successful. So why can't I use that to shop online and take away the burden and the cost of the cards? And we are behind, I won't go through those, but right across Europe, in different countries, either by banks working together or by not working together, whatever way it happened, what has emerged is a whole host of bank transfer services that work in real time. And when you look, if I showed you the stats there for Ireland and you saw the dominance of Visa and MasterCard as a payment method, if you looked at that for Holland, you wouldn't see that. You would see actually bank transfers as the number one. That's the way that people pay online. In Germany, they pay by direct debit, a thing called ELV. They don't pay by credit card. So we don't have, in the UK, there's a thing called faster payments, but it's not online payments. It's just the ability for me to be able to, if I bank with Lloyds, I can send money to you if you bank with RBS, and I can do that in real time via the internet. But I can't do that with a website just yet, but I'm sure into the future that will come as well. But we don't have any plans in Ireland to do anything like this at the moment. But it is, and if I said to you that we were processing, I don't know what, there's some merchants that we don't process for certain airlines and certain gaming companies yet, I should say. But if we were looking at those, and there must be in excess of 10 billion being processed online in Ireland at the moment. And when I look at the bank transfers that operate in Europe, they typically get about 30% of the market. But it doesn't tend to take it away from the credit card business. It tends to grow the overall market. So I estimate that we're probably about 3 billion per annum that we're losing, because there are many people out there who don't have credit cards and necessarily don't want to use their debit cards, but would be prepared to pay and to shop online if they could pay directly from their bank account. And I reckon it's probably got that order. And obviously, if you start talking to the consumer directly through the online bank account in a different way, it means you can also set up direct debit mandates through your banking interface and all that type of stuff. But that's probably for another day's discussion. Finally, because of the issue of fraud, there's an issue about security. And you've seen loads of stories, I'm sure, about all the different breaches that happen because companies are being threatened and they're also being targeted because people know that they host a lot of secure and valuable information. And there's websites that you can go to where you can buy credit card numbers and so on. We spend a fortune every year locking down the systems. Our processes are prolonged and quite complex now because of the levels of security changes that we have to make and the security that we've got to do, right down to everything. I was saying that my USB ports don't work on our laptops, for example. Everything right across the board has to be locked down black and white. And all of that is because we hold credit card numbers. And to do that, the schemes brought out this standard which is called PCI. And PCI is the card payment industry data security standards. And Visa and MasterCard took this out to market and said, you must be this. And if you have a breach, and if you're not that, we're going to fine you $25 per card or something like this. So they now have the capacity to put you out of business if you haven't protected the information that they've actually given to their consumers. So in other words, I'm a retailer, and I have a breach in my systems, and I lose information to the fraudster. Visa and MasterCard can come in and fine me, I forget what the exact number is, it might be $20, $25 per card that has been compromised. Which means you're out of business in a lot of cases, right? And a lot of people have had issues with this, and it's a real cost to the industry. And of late, the latest blogs and posts and commentary is on this. Is that why? Because there's a concept of actually encrypting that information right at source, which you as the card issuer, if you actually did that and sent around tokens and people didn't have to use their real credit card numbers. There are technical solutions, in other words, that could be implemented at scheme level, which have not been implemented. And this is causing a huge burden. And this, I believe, is one of the drivers why in Europe as well, people are moving away from credit cards. And credit cards as a form of payment will be falling throughout the European market. And what's rising are debit cards, cash, the bank transfers, and other alternative methods of payments. The PayPal, the Neteller, the money bookers, the use cash. There's people now who are providing solutions whereby I can go to a store, a Spar, and I can get myself a printout from the credit card terminal, pay over my tenner, and I get a number printed out in that receipt which I can then use to shop online. So nothing to do with the credit card world at all. So it's interesting, and the failure of the schemes to really address this as a fundamental issue will be the demise of them eventually. Within Ireland, we have banks who are obviously involved in payments. We've got a lot of software and service providers, which I showed you earlier on that list of the 20, 25 companies involved with EI support. And we've got lots of businesses who are processing payments and selling payments. And they never meet. And there's nobody, no forum where any kind of sense of vertical integration between those groups actually happens. And it's one of the things that we need to see in the country is this sense of collaboration between these groups. Because unless we get those three parties involved, the businesses, the actual software providers and the banks themselves, and involved in this, it's unlikely that we're actually going to achieve anything. That's what the evidence of the last 10 years will tell us, that that's the case, where these ideas are there, but they're not coming to fruition. So how do we make them real? I finish up with the I got this great book recently, and I just talked about the comparison between the USA and Europe, And some people think that you only scale an internet business if you go to America. Well, it's not true. Europe is right on the doorstep here, and there's 125 million online shoppers in Europe, which is not that far behind the US, which is with 140 million. So there is real opportunity. And the good news is that 3 countries account for 70% of the e-commerce revenue that's generated in Europe at the moment. And so you set yourself up and you sell into the UK, Germany, and France. Happy days, you've just opened up to 70% of 125 million people. It's a real opportunity for people to sell online and to participate in commerce there as well. And I think this is too small. I think it's much bigger. And everybody gives a different definition to e-commerce, and everybody gives a different definition to what it means. But they're big, and they are growing, and they're continuing to grow. And certainly, it's the thing to watch is that you don't want to be too flippant about it, because there is this, I coined this phrase recently called near commerce. The way I see it happening is that the people in France, for example, are very good at selling into Belgium, Switzerland and Luxembourg, right? That's where but they won't sell into the UK via the online market, right? And in Germany they're selling into, so this kind of linguistically or culturally friendly neighbourhood type thing going on at the moment, where that's working extremely well. But I mean, like for us, obviously, here's, the biggest e-commerce market in Europe, in the UK at the moment. And like it's vibrant, it is growing at a massive rate, and that's why we've got a whole team over there at the moment, because there is great opportunity and a lot of sales happening online. And you can see the way in the UK with the domestic Maestro card as well, now being fully secured online, that's encouraging more growth in e-commerce as well. So in conclusion, I think that the growth is going to continue into the push methods rather than the pull methods. I think that the pricing of that, the risk of that, the security issues with that are all less, and therefore these will become more popular into the future. The scheme dominance will reduce, Visa and MasterCard will reduce in terms of dominance for online payment methods. For us as a country to succeed, we should have an industry body which is not controlled by the banks, but controlled by the banks and the software providers and the businesses all alike. And we need to get access to the regulator. A lot of the companies that I've mentioned there are going to have to, or may need to, apply for licenses under the PSD and become payments institutions as well. And again, there's no, if you ask them all today where they are with respect to that, you'll find that they're all at different stages because they haven't really thought about it. But there should be some way to brief them all in relation to that in some organised fashion, so that people know well in advance. They got to the stage where we actually found it easier to talk to the SFA in the UK, and we had direct access with them about our own application for that. And we've now put on the agenda, considering applying in the UK and passporting back to here. And that was a couple of months ago. I know since then somebody has been assigned in the regulator to address it. But nonetheless, the SFA started taking applications for payments institutions from the 1st of May. Okay, we still don't have a date as to when we can start to submit them. So we should have, because there's many companies that for whom this is going to be relevant, I'll skip the rest. I'll just mention this, my little friend, the Internet Growth Alliance, and just again, thanks to Jill and the people here. I just got involved here about a year and a half ago, over a year ago, and I've been enthralled by it. And I've been involved obviously with the Irish Internet Association for a long time as well. And with Enterprise Ireland, I was very lucky to participate in the Leadership for Growth programme last year at Stanford, which was a superb programme. And between us all and the Irish Software Association, we've just started the concept of meeting and coming together on a more regular basis to discuss very practical things which could be done to help internet businesses to scale. And we're really interested in and they want to network, they want access to role models. They got the likes of Ray Nolan out there who runs Hostel World, and Hostel World is phenomenal, the success they've had online. But we need to get Ray Nolan into a room with a whole bunch of other people who can listen to him and learn from him as well, which he's willing to do, and he's participating in this. And what EI have done over the last couple of weeks is agreed to construct a program which is going to be called something like the Internet Growth Acceleration Program, which will be there for internet businesses in Ireland to try and find a way to accelerate that growth. And that's something that we're really looking forward to working with them on, to try and help to try and find and to scale other internet businesses. So it's a little bit of an aside, not quite related to payments, but nonetheless I have to get the plug in. So so there you go. So there's a couple of websites that we run as well. So if they're, and there's a white paper there. If you're really interested in online payments, that's not a brochure. That's just a white paper that discusses some of the strategic issues that businesses are faced with when selling online. And the pens are there, of course. And there's also a T-shirt and a box of chocolates to whoever. But I'm only one of those. So. Okay, great. Thanks, John.
Thanks very much, Colm.